The sterile scent of antiseptic, the hushed rustle of turning textbook pages, the relentless fluorescent hum of the library, this was the atmosphere that had enveloped me for the better part of 3 grueling years. My name is Ananya Sharma, though most people call me Anya. I wasn't just in medical school, I was inhabited by it. The human body, in all its intricate, awe-inspiring complexity, was a universe I was desperate to understand, to heal. Each lecture, each lab, each late-night study session was a step deeper into that universe, a privilege I never took for granted. The pressure at Althea Medical University was immense, a constant, thrumming undercurrent that pushed us all to our limits, and sometimes beyond. We were all high achievers, the cream of the crop, but even amongst the brilliant, there were shades of ambition, and some shades were darker than others. My notes were legendary, not because I intended them to be, but because my brain processed information best by deconstructing it, then rebuilding it visually. My study guides weren't just text, they were intricate tapestries of color, coded diagrams, mnemonics woven into sketches, flowcharts that mapped out physiological pathways with an almost artistic precision. They were the product of countless hours, of sacrificing sleep and social interactions, of a singular focus on mastering the vast ocean of medical knowledge. I shared them willingly, within my small study group, a tight-knit trio of myself, the ever-calm and methodical Ben Carter, and the quick-witted, perpetually caffeinated Lena Petrova. We believed in collaborative learning, in lifting each other up. Then there was Julian Vance. Julian was, on the surface, the golden boy of our class. Effortlessly charming, impeccably dressed, always ready with a confident answer or a well-placed compliment to a professor. He came from a family of renowned surgeons, his path seemingly preordained, gilded. Yet, beneath the polished veneer, I'd always sensed a brittleness, a desperate need for validation that sometimes manifested as a sharp, competitive edge. He wasn't part of our study group. He preferred to cultivate an air of solitary genius, though he wasn't above casually inquiring about topics we'd covered. His questions a little too specific, his gaze a little too intent when he saw my meticulously organized binders. The preclinical years were a blur of anatomy, biochemistry, pharmacology, pathology. Now, in our 3rd year, we were on the precipice of the Great Filter, the Comprehensive Basic Science Examination, CBSE, a grueling, multi-day ordeal that would largely determine our residency prospects, our future specialties, our entire careers. The stakes were astronomically high. For months, the library had become our collective hermitage, the air thick with the scent of stress and old paper. My notes, refined and expanded over 2 years, were my lifeline, my armor against the impending academic onslaught. I had them organized in a series of heavy-duty binders, each section tabbed, cross-referenced, a testament to my obsessive dedication. Julian's competitiveness had become more pronounced as the CBSEs loom. He'd make subtle digs about my overly elaborate notes, yet I'd often see him trying to catch a glimpse of them when he thought I wasn't looking. He'd casually drop comments about how some people just had a knack for rote memorization, implying my understanding was superficial, not innate like his supposed brilliance. I brushed it off as exam stress, the kind of posturing that was unfortunately common in such a high-pressure environment. I was too focused on my own preparation to engage in petty rivalries. The week before the CBSEs was Hell Week intensified. Sleep was a rumor. Nutrition was an afterthought. My entire existence revolved around those binders, around cementing every pathway, every drug interaction, every pathological slide into my brain. I had a small, locked carrel in the deepest, quietest recesses of the university library, a tiny cave where I'd surrounded myself with my academic arsenal. The sabotage happened on a Tuesday, 3 days before the first exam. I'd left my Carol for a brief 30-minute dinner break, a luxury I rarely afforded myself, but Lena had insisted I needed a proper meal. I'd locked the Carol, as always. My binders, my life's work for the past 2 years, were neatly stacked on the small desk. When I returned, the key turned in the lock as usual. I pushed open the door, and my world tilted. It wasn't a dramatic movie-style ransacking. It was far more insidious, more psychologically cruel. My binders were still there, neatly stacked. But as I reached for the first one, cardiovascular renal systems, I noticed a faint, sweet, chemical odor. I opened it. The pages were stuck together, fused into a solid, unreadable block by a clear, sticky substance that had been meticulously poured over every single page. My meticulously drawn diagrams, my color-coded notes, my lifeline, all of it was a congealed, useless mass. My breath hitched. My hands began to tremble. I grabbed the next binder. Neuroscience, psychiatry, the same. And the next? Endocrinology, reproduction, and the next. All of them. Every single page of every single binder, systematically, deliberately destroyed. Not torn, not burned, but rendered utterly, irrevocably unusable. The ink bleeding into a meaningless miasma beneath the clear, hardening goo. It was an act of such calculated malice, designed not just to destroy my notes, but to shatter my confidence, to cripple me right before the most important exams of my life. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't an accident. This was targeted. This was personal. My mind reeled. Who? Why? The library was supposed to be a sanctuary. My Carol was locked. My first instinct was to scream, to rage, to break down, and a part of me did, internally. A cold, hollow despair began to creep in. How could I possibly face the CBSEs without my notes? They weren't just summaries. They were the very architecture of my understanding. Then, through the fog of shock and incipient panic, a different part of me, the part that had dissected a human cadaver with steady hands, the part that could diagnose a complex case from a list of seemingly unrelated symptoms, began to assert itself. The analytical part, the problem solver. This wasn't just a misfortune, it was a crime, and criminals leave traces. I didn't touch anything further. My mind, already in diagnostic mode, knew the importance of preserving evidence, however unlikely it seemed that any would be found. I took out my phone, my hands still shaking, and photographed everything, documenting the scene with a clinical detachment that surprised even myself. The neatly stacked but ruined binders. The faint sweet smell, I recognized it vaguely, some kind of clear adhesive or resin. My next call was to campus security. The officer who responded, a kindly but world-weary man named Officer Miller, was sympathetic but pessimistic. "These Carols, miss," he said, sighing. "They're not Fort Knox." A determined kid with a bobby pin. And as for who? Well, in a place this competitive, right before big exams, he trailed off, the implication clear. He took a report, dusted for fingerprints, which he warned would likely be useless in a high-traffic library, and promised to review the security camera footage from the hallway outside the Carol section, though he cautioned that the cameras weren't aimed directly at individual Carol doors. While Officer Miller went to review the footage, I sat there, amidst the wreckage of my academic life, and forced myself to think. The sweet smell. It was familiar. I'd smelled something similar in the histology lab, a mounting medium for slides, perhaps, or something from the art department, a type of varnish or resin. The perpetrator had to have access to such a substance, and the knowledge of how to use it to cause maximum, irreversible damage without creating a huge mess that would draw immediate attention. Then, the rumors started. They began as whispers, insidious and hard to trace. then coalesced into a more coherent, damaging narrative. Anya Sharma, apparently, was cracking under the pressure. Anya Sharma had been seen acting erratically. Anya Sharma was so desperate to get an edge that she'd been trying to illicitly obtain copies of old exam papers. Anya Sharma had even tried to bribe a junior faculty member for special assistance. The stories were preposterous, utterly baseless, yet they spread like a virus through the anxious, gossip-hungry medical school grapevine. Each rumor was a fresh stab, designed to discredit me, to isolate me, to perhaps even provide a motive for why I might have faked the destruction of my own notes, a desperate plea for a postponement I hadn't asked for and didn't want. The timing was too perfect, the coordination too slick. The destruction of my notes, followed immediately by this character assassination. It was a two-pronged attack. And my mind, with a sickening certainty, kept returning to one person, Julian Vance. His jealousy, his subtle undermining, his desperate need to be seen as the best. He had the intellect to devise such a cruel, precise act of sabotage and the social cunning to orchestrate the rumor campaign. But proving it? That was another matter. Officer Miller returned, his expression apologetic. The hallway camera footage is inconclusive, Miss Sharma. Lots of students coming and going. No one's seen trying to force your carol lock. Whoever did this was either very lucky or very clever. Disappointment, sharp and bitter, welled up. But I wouldn't give up. I had 3 days. 3 days to somehow reconstruct years of knowledge without my primary tool. 3 days to prepare for exams that would define my future. And 3 days to find a shred of evidence to expose the person who was trying to destroy me. My study group, Ben and Lena, were horrified and incandescent with rage on my behalf when I told them what had happened. They immediately offered to share all their notes, their resources. Their loyalty was a balm to my wounded spirit. "We'll get through this, Anya," Ben said, his calm demeanor a much-needed anchor. "And we'll nail the bastard who did this." Lena, ever pragmatic, started a counter-rumor campaign, fiercely defending my integrity to anyone who would listen. While Ben and Lena helped me triage the most critical study topics, creating a crash course study plan, I began my own quiet investigation. I couldn't rely on campus security alone. I started with the substance used on my notes. I discreetly visited the histology lab, then the art department's supply store, sniffing around, looking for adhesives or resins with that distinctive, sweet chemical odor. In the art department, I found it, a fast-drying clear epoxy resin used for casting and sealing, known for its strong bonding properties and its tendency to fuse paper. It was sold in relatively small, easy-to-conceal bottles. The store kept a log of purchases for certain restricted chemicals, but this resin, apparently, wasn't one of them. However, the store assistant, a chatty art student named Maya, remembered someone from the medical school buying a couple of bottles a week prior. "Unusual," she'd commented. "Med students don't usually buy this stuff." Said it was for a personal project. She couldn't remember his face clearly, just that he was tall, well-dressed, seemed in a hurry. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Next, the rumors. They were too specific, too coordinated to be random gossip. I asked Lena, with her extensive network of social connections, to try and trace the origin point of the most damaging ones, particularly the story about me trying to bribe a faculty member. Rumors, like viruses, have a patient zero. While cramming 12 to 16 hours a day, trying to mentally reconstruct my color-coded diagrams from memory, a truly Herculean task, I also spent my brief breaks analyzing the library's digital footprint. The carols had Ethernet ports, and while I rarely used mine, preferring the university-wide Wi-Fi, I knew the system logged network connections. If someone had been in my carrel long enough to meticulously destroy every binder, had they been careless enough to connect to the wired network, perhaps to pass the time, or even to look up something on my machine if they'd managed to guess my, admittedly simple, stress-induced password, accessing those specific port logs officially was impossible without a formal IT request, which would take days I didn't have. But Ben, our resident coding genius, knew a few unofficial backdoors into some of the less secured network monitoring systems. It was ethically grey and risky, but my desperation was a powerful motivator. Late one night, while I drilled myself on cranial nerves, Ben worked his magic. "Got it?" he whispered, his face illuminated by the glow of his laptop. "Port activity log for your Carol's Ethernet jack. There was an unauthorized device connection on Tuesday, during your dinner break. Lasted about 20 minutes. Device MAC address doesn't match any of your registered devices, Anya. A MAC address, the unique hardware identifier of a network interface card. It could be spoofed, but often amateurs didn't bother." The CBSEs began. The first day, pharmacology and microbiology, was a blur of multiple-choice questions that seemed designed to induce existential dread. I walked out feeling like my brain had been through a meat grinder, but also with a strange sense of calm. The sabotage, perversely, had forced me to engage with the material on an even deeper, more conceptual level, as I'd had to reconstruct it from first principles rather than relying on my visual memory aids. Lena, meanwhile, had struck gold. She'd traced the bribery rumor back to a particularly gossipy classmate, who, when pressed, admitted he'd heard it from Julian Vance. Julian had apparently confided in him, with great concern, about my unethical behavior. The snake, the MAC address from the Carol, was our next target. Ben explained that the university, for its own network management, maintained a database cross-referencing MAC addresses with student-registered devices. Again, official access was slow, but Ben, using a vulnerability he'd discovered in the student portal's device registration API, which he swore he'd report anonymously after this was all over, managed to query the database. The MAC address was registered to a high-end tablet. Registered to Julian Vance. My breath caught. We had him. The resin purchase from the art store, circumstantial but damning in context, the origin of the slanderous rumors. And now, a digital fingerprint placing his device in my locked Carol during the exact window of the sabotage. The remaining days of the CBSEs were an out-of-body experience. I was functioning on adrenaline and sheer willpower, my mind compartmentalizing the ongoing investigation from the immediate, overwhelming task of recalling vast tracts of medical knowledge. I visualized my old notes, the colors, the diagrams, forcing my brain to recreate them internally. It was exhausting, but somehow I felt a strange clarity, a focus born of fury and determination. The moment the final exam ended, a wave of utter exhaustion, so profound it was almost peaceful, washed over me. I didn't know if I'd passed, let alone excelled. I just knew I had given it everything, fought with every fibre of my being, despite the albatross of the sabotage. The next morning, armed with our meticulously compiled dossier of evidence, Maya's statement from the art store, Lena's trace of the rumors, Ben's network logs and MAC address trace, screenshots of Julian's subtle but persistent online digs at my study methods from months prior, we went to see Dean Armitage, the head of Althea Medical University. Dean Armitage was a formidable woman, a renowned cardiologist before she moved into administration, known for her sharp intellect and her unwavering commitment to academic integrity. She listened to my account, and to Ben and Lena's corroborating statements, her expression growing increasingly grave as we laid out the evidence, piece by irrefutable piece. She examined the photographs of my ruined notes, her lips tightening. When we presented the network logs and the MAC address trace linking Julian's tablet to my carol. She simply nodded, a muscle working in her jaw. "This is exceptionally serious," she said finally, her voice low and cold. "Mr. Vance is one of our top-performing students. Or so it appeared." She looked at me, a new respect in her eyes. "Sharma, to even sit these exams after such a despicable act, let alone to function, is a testament to your character and resilience. I will launch an immediate and thorough investigation. You have my word." The university's investigation was swift and, true to Dean Armitage's promise, thorough. Julian, confronted with the evidence, apparently crumbled. His polished composure shattered, his arrogance deflated. He confessed. His motive, as I had suspected, was a toxic brew of jealousy, insecurity, and an overwhelming fear that I, the girl with the overly elaborate notes, would outperform him on the CBSEs, shattering his carefully constructed image of effortless brilliance and jeopardizing his chances at the ultra-competitive surgical residency he coveted. He'd apparently used a master key, illicitly obtained from a disgruntled janitorial student he'd bribed to access my carol. The resin was a calculated choice, quiet, permanent, devastating. The CBSE results came out a week later. I had not just passed, I had excelled, scoring in the top percentile nationally. The relief was so immense, so overwhelming. It felt like a physical weight lifting from my soul. All those sleepless nights, all that desperate, focused effort, had paid off. I had not let him break me. The disciplinary board hearing for Julian Vance was a closed-door affair. The outcome, however, was made public, albeit discreetly, within the university. Julian was found guilty of gross academic misconduct, sabotage, and slander. He was expelled from Althea Medical University, his medical career over before it had truly begun. The reverberations through our class were profound: shock, disbelief from some who had been taken in by his charm, a grim satisfaction from others who had sensed his darker side. There was no triumph in me at his downfall, only a quiet, weary sadness. A brilliant mind, twisted by insecurity and ambition, had chosen destruction over honest competition. He had tried to extinguish my light. In doing so, had only revealed the darkness within himself. Life at Althea settled back into its demanding rhythm, but I was changed. The experience had been a crucible, forging a new resilience in me, a deeper understanding of the pressures that can drive people to desperate acts, but also a profound appreciation for loyalty, for integrity, for the quiet strength found in facing adversity head-on. My notes, I started to recreate them, slowly, patiently, but this time they felt different. They weren't just tools for academic success. They were symbols of my own tenacity, a testament to the fact that no sabotage, no matter how malicious, could truly destroy the knowledge I had worked so hard to build within myself. The path to becoming a doctor was long and arduous, I knew, but I walked it now with a new, hard-won confidence, my focus clear, my spirit like a well-set bone, stronger in the broken places.